With a mini batch gradient descent, we calculate the gradients and update the weights once per batch. The size of these batches, recall, are determined by the batch size hyperparameter that we covered in detail in a previous lesson. So specifically, we calculate the gradients of the loss with respect to all the weights in the network for each sample in a given batch. Then for each weight, we average the gradient values over all the samples in that batch and update the weight with that average gradient. So doing the weight update per batch with mini batch gradient descent, we can see is kind of middle ground between both stochastic gradient descent, where the weight update was happening per sample, and batch gradient descent, where the weight update was happening per epoch. So with this approach, we can see that we're kind of averaging the advantages of both batch gradient descent and stochastic gradient descent. And we can see that with the loss curve here, where we are having the fluctuations, but they're smoother and not as much of jolts as what we saw with stochastic gradient descent. And we're kind of smoothly descending like what we saw with batch gradient descent. So now we've seen the three main variations of the gradient descent-based algorithms, which really just differ from each other in when they calculate the gradients and perform the weight update during the training process.